I had this strange sensation of feeling that something was significantly changing for me in my experience of this reality on a fundamental level. And I know this sounds so strange for people to hear it, but it made me really uncomfortable. So imagine this, I'm standing at a small town bank, and I've just asked the teller to pull up all of the PayPal deposits into my bank account over the past year. I'm ready to move out from the mountains into the city, and I'm looking for concrete ways to prove to a landlord that I have ongoing income. I've got my AdSense printouts, I've got my client receipts from coaching, and I've even got a printout of my savings account. The teller is a rather young woman. She has a vibe about her that she's probably new to working there. And I see her go to work on my request, and as she's looking at the screen, her face just drops and her eyes get really big. And then in a loud voice, she says, "Where is all of this money coming from?" It's strange how at certain points in your life, strangers can speak into life the things that are unspoken inside of ourselves. And she definitely signified that for me in that moment. That will come up later in this video, in the section about overwhelm. I have missed being here. I have missed all of my beautiful viewers and book club members all around the world. You're still here, and I thank you. In this video, I'm going to talk about why I was away, why my channel didn't take off the way it should have. And I would say that there are three major components to that: illness and trauma, overwhelm, and fake friends. Let's get into it. I had a heart attack in 2015, shortly after I moved out to the mountains. Both my mother and my grandmother had died young from heart attacks, and it was assumed it was due to their lifestyle conditions. Right? My mother was a chain smoker, she had diabetes, she never exercised, she didn't eat healthy. I thought that if I avoided doing all those things that I would be just fine. Yet here I was, hiking alone in the mountains, out of cell service, the day before I'd end up in the ER, and I'm having chest pains, and I'm thinking it's probably seasonal allergies. In the back of the ambulance was the third time that I've been brought back to life with emergency measures. I had a stent placed in my right coronary artery, and then I had 2 emergency surgeries related to the heart attack within a few months, so later that year. But throughout the rest of the year, I was in and out of the ER because I would have phantom heart attacks. It was like my heart had PTSD, and anytime it felt taxed or there was a slight little twinge, which can happen when your heart's healing, right? Because I had a spontaneous coronary artery dissection. So I had a heart attack not because I had blocked blood vessels or I had plaque or cholesterol. It was none of those things. It happened because the tissues in my heart can tear under stress. So I had a tear in my heart that was healing, and deep healing our hearts, literally and figuratively, it can be painful. However, this was the most beautiful time of my entire life. I lived in the Crow's Nest Pass of Alberta, Canada. Alberta is my home province. I'm originally from Edmonton. I love this province and I love this country. And the land healed me back to health. The quiet, the landscapes, the beauty, everything inspired me. I had great neighbors. We used to do fun things like flying drones on the roof or going ice fishing. My neighbors drove me into the hospital once, and that's a 3-hour drive into the city. Now, there's no way that someone watching my videos really would have been able to tell what I was going through. I come from a single parent home. I was the eldest of three, and something that I learned from a very young age is how to make it look like everything's perfectly fine when it's not. If anyone caught on that things were going badly at home for me as a kid, and they definitely were, my mother was very abusive and neglectful, the abuse would double, right? Because then she'd be angry that someone noticed anything, and that would happen if people called child services and they came to the house, or social workers came to the house. She would tell us how to lie and to fake it, and she'd say, if you don't do this, they're going to put you in a foster home, and then all these bad things will happen to you. So I learned from a very young age not to need anything either. I wasn't allowed to need anything, and how to pretend and be okay when you're not okay. There were some giveaways in my videos, though, that I realized looking back is so outrageous that I made videos shortly before and after going to the hospital. But there is one video where you can clearly see that I am wearing an intake bracelet. Now, while I was dealing with all of these health problems, I also was dealing with a lot of trauma, unresolved issues. I had just gotten out of a long-term relationship before I moved out to the mountains. That was my getaway, and it was perfect timing for everything that happened. But being in the hospital, it started to remind me again of when I had been in the hospital as a child, and all the time I'd spent there alone, and all the feelings of desolation and hopelessness that I had felt at times. Well, I had just some amazingly beautiful experiences in the hospital this go around, in all little hospitals throughout southern Alberta, where they'd be like, oh yeah, you're the 30-something who had the heart attack, right? And I was like, yep, that's me. When I was a kid, my mother liked when I would do things that would reflect well on her. So when I got good marks at school, when it was discovered that I had a genius level IQ as a kid, I don't think I have it anymore. Like, I've caught up to it, trust me. When I would, start little businesses and make money that she would take. When I would be the first one in my class, I would go out and I would find jobs. I've been working a job since I was 14 years old. I would go out and find jobs, and people would be like, in school, like, how did you get a job working at the mall? Or you work at the pet store? How did you get that? That's so cool, right? That's cool when you're like 15 or 14 years old that you work at the pet store, stuff like that, right? So my mother was really happy when I would be doing things that, contributed to making her look good, or that would provide her with money. But she always tried to keep me back in a certain way. It was like she didn't want me to get to a certain level. She had jealousy with me. You'll find that a lot of these toxic, damaged mothers, they compete with their daughters for men, over looks, over success. It's a horrible situation. I would have a goal in mind that I wanted, I wanted jeans, because everyone was wearing jeans, and I just had to wear those matching sweatsuits and a sweat top that they sold at Zeller's. So I said, I'm gonna get some jeans. So I went out and got a job, and then I got my first paycheck. I think I worked for, was it $6 an hour? I earned enough to buy these jeans. And I remember I learned from all the times when I did things, my mother would take my money because her free welfare check was not enough. I learned when I got my paycheck, I went and bought those jeans for myself, and I was so proud. And she saw them, and it just immediately, she was just angry that I didn't give that money to her. So it was like I had the exuberance of a child, of wanting something, working for it, and achieving it, and being met with this, this energy that's like condemning me for what I had done. I internalized a lot of this, and that will happen to people who have damaging parents. You start to internalize the things that they've done to you, the oppression they've put on you, the negative voices. And I just found that as I was gaining in success on YouTube, like, I have a relatively small channel, but I managed to make it wildly successful for me financially. And on one hand, I did expect it, but on the other hand, the level I was able to achieve was unexpected. That was how my first video came about. That has over 3 million views now. I just thought, this is crazy how easy this is to make money on YouTube. I just want to tell people. And from there, based on that interest, I saw an opportunity to help more people, to start a business for myself, and that's what I did. But I was just, the energy in that video is true and sincere, and I think that's why people liked it so much, partially. But I was just surprised by my success, and it kept growing and growing, and I wasn't even working that hard at it. But due to my childhood, my low self-esteem from how I'd been treated for many years by my mother as a child, I had this inner glass ceiling, kind of like this inner version of my mother that, when things were going too good for me, held me back. And I was falling into a depression where I just was not motivated. I was highly critical of everything I did. I have probably 50 edited videos that were ready to go, that I just never uploaded, that I put a ton of effort and energy into, and I just couldn't, they just were not good enough for me. And I knew that they would be acceptable to a lot of people and it would help people, but I just couldn't get over it. The inner critic was way too loud. And not only that, but here I had just had a heart attack out of the blue. The doctors were completely baffled. And although they told me that it's very unlikely that it would happen again, I was having chest pains and I didn't even know if I was going to survive. I actually recorded one night when I was at my absolute lowest. I recorded a series of videos that I would schedule to auto-upload if I wasn't there to stop it, in case I died.
The world was dangerous for me as a child. I developed a very deep connection to an inner sense of myself that was beyond my body and that was beyond my surroundings. I'm so proud of the person I've become.
In Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill says, "If riches come, and when they do, they'll come in such abundant form, you'll wonder where they've been your entire life." This brings us right back to that small town bank where the teller has just made a loud exclamation about the amount of money that she sees consistently pouring into my bank account. It's in the fine print at PayPal that they can take your money whenever they want with no explanation, and you have no entitlement to get it back. I had friends this had actually happened to, so I made sure that my PayPal account didn't go over $1,000. Anytime my online earnings hit $1,000 in my PayPal account, whether that was from coaching fees, digital product sales, or affiliate product sales, I would immediately transfer it into my bank account. So on average, I was doing that once or twice a week, but there were definitely some times where I would make $1,000 online the same day. And I'm a frugal person. There are certain things that I do enjoy. There are certain things that I like spending money on. But in general, to me, the greatest luxury is time, freedom of thought, knowledge, and nature. And so I wasn't spending a lot of that money either, at least not at that time. But I did know that I had this strange sensation of feeling that something was significantly changing for me in my experience of this reality on a fundamental level. And I know this sounds so strange for people to hear it, but it made me really uncomfortable. You have to understand that my entire life up to that point, I had been poor and struggling. My mother had alcoholic boyfriends in and out of the house. I'm very lucky I didn't suffer the fate that most, daughters of women who do that did, which would be sexual abuse by some random man. They had made comments here and there, but they knew I wasn't having it. They knew I had a lot of animosity towards them because of their bad influence on my mother, and so none of them ever tried anything. But one thing they did do was they didn't like having me oppose them and their bad behaviors towards my brothers and my mom. So they would convince my mom to kick me out of the house, and she very gladly did that. It happened many times. I ended up getting my own place for the first time instead of, crashing at relatives or at friends' places when I was 16 years old, and I was really proud of that. But there were definitely times when I had a hand-to-mouth existence. Forget paycheck to paycheck. I don't know if you guys remember those CD companies where you used to be able to take stamps and put them on a sheet of all your CD choices and you could mail them in. They would send you back this big box. And I guess the thing was it was supposed to be a subscription service or something. There was some kind of strange catch to it that I realized didn't apply to me because I was underage. So I would order those CDs and then I would listen to them, and I figured out that at pawn stores and secondhand bookstores that I used to frequent, that they sold used CDs. And I remember one day seeing a sign that said we buy CDs. So if I needed to eat, I would take my least favorite at the time CDs and I would bring them into those stores, and I think I would get like a pretty good deal on them. You get $14 for a CD that you paid 8 cents for a whole ton of them in the mail. And sometimes that was how I ate. I still remember what it feels like to go to the grocery store and have to calculate everything you buy because you have a very specific amount in your bank account. And if you mess up, you're gonna get rejected when you try to pay. When I was a kid, my mother was on welfare, and we ate rather well for the first half of the month. My mother always cooked homemade things. She taught me how to cook, things from scratch. And we had a garden in the back that we tended to. But, halfway through the month, the cupboards were looking sparse. You'd open the fridge and there'd be, some kind of spoiled milk and maybe a crusty onion off in the corner. We had a Polish neighbor. I have a lot of stories about this family, both good and bad, but mostly good. And the father worked at the grocery store, so occasionally we would come and there would be a bag on the back porch, which would be all of the stale donuts from the end of the day. He would throw them all into a bag and he would leave them on the back porch for us. And that was like Christmas for us. You'd be hungry and starving all day as a kid, and then suddenly someone shows up and there's a giant bag of assorted donuts. As you can probably imagine, growing up with that sense of food scarcity, and then food scarcity with a giant sugar binge, it definitely did not bode well for my eating habits later in life. And that's something that I really had to overcome. That became a demon for me, and I'm going to talk about that in future videos. So I had a poverty mentality. And in my mid to late 20s is when I was introduced to new age things, new age ideas, personal development ideas. Prior to that, I had been interested in like religious things, things about angels or about spirituality or the afterlife, trying to understand the things I had seen, during the times when I was brought back to life as a kid and stuff like that. But this was the first time I kind of started experiencing this new thought, the law of attraction and using your subconscious mind. This is the first time I had started experiencing those things, and I really dove into it. And although there is definitely some negativity that surrounds that community, a lot of them have gotten it wrong. I always had a deep spiritual connection with myself and my understanding of God, my sense of God. So when I kind of incorporated these new ideas I found with that already existing deep spiritual connection, miracles and magic began to happen in my life. And I had had a pretty miraculous and magical life prior to that anyway. Even though I struggled and I dealt with a lot of trauma, depression, anxiety, and low self-esteem and poverty, I had many amazing opportunities and people come into my life. So I set up all of these routines to start breaking myself out of that poverty mentality and thinking about how I could add value to the world. And I remember some of the things I did and how the results were so tangible. One of them is I told you guys about how I was in the hospital with my heart attack. I hadn't told anybody except for one childhood friend who's not really on social media and another really close friend who is a popular YouTuber at the time who doesn't have any other social media. This person doesn't talk to anyone. This person would not go and tell my information. And so nobody knew what was going on. However, I started getting messages, emails, comments during the week I was in the hospital talking about my heart, saying, "I love your heart, Adelle. You have a beautiful heart." And on top of that, my sales online and the money I was making skyrocketed during this time for me when I had left my body yet again and come back. And I really do feel that I brought something back with me when I did that. I had numerous spiritual, supernatural experiences that shortly after surviving that heart attack that I haven't really talked about. I talked about it a bit in my book, but there's still things that to this day are just so special and personal to me. I don't know, it might be time to share those things. The doctors told me that I had to live in a major city for the rest of my life because of my heart condition. And I said, well, that's not even an option for me. And I went back to the mountains and I got insurance that would cover a helicopter ride to the city if I needed an emergency help. And the land healed me. There's dramatic wind out there. There's fast moving clouds and sparkling midday sun showers with, the sun coming through like diamonds, little rainbows. It was just magical. And I remember feeling like I was existing in a new reality. And I remember at one point going through this beautiful, one thing you need to know about Alberta is we've got these beautiful fields of waving grain. And I remember going through one and running my hands through the grain and just feeling the sun on my face and thinking about how much of this grain was out there. I could never touch it, and it never, it always regenerated, and it was just as far as the eye could see. And that is the abundance and the goodness of God and nature. That's what it does. It multiplies and it grows beautiful things. And I remember connecting that with my business and the results that I saw. Things would just happen overnight. It was wild. My coaching business was doing really great as well. I didn't even have to advertise it. There are a lot of people out there who are looking for someone who they can really connect with, who listens and who is genuinely curious about them. That's the real benefit of therapy. I've learned that after the thousands of dollars and the years I've spent on different types of therapy. That's what it really comes down to. I was able to provide that for a small group of clients on an ongoing basis, and that alone would have been enough. I had one client who, he worked a very stressful job in Washington, D.C., and he wanted to talk to me for an hour every day for a month because of something he was going through, and he just needed, some support during that time. And I was charging $300 an hour at that time. You do the math on that. I remember how exciting and fun it was to leave the hospital. Out of the numerous times I had been in the dang hospital, look on my phone, check my email, and see how much money I had made that day while I did nothing but lie in the hospital bed. And it mostly felt really, really good. But then there was also this element to me that was still stuck in my past. Potentially and probably an element of that negativity of my mother. When I was a kid, and actually my whole life, I've always attracted successful people or lucky people into my life. I am a lucky, successful person. And even when I was a young kid who was poor and, abused and everything else, I was still a lucky, successful person. It was like everything I touched or got involved in became a thing. And so I had friends, I would go over to their house. I remember I had this one friend who was the rich girl in the class, and this was in the early 90s. And I remember I went to her house, they were renovating, and that's the first place I saw a island kitchen. Houses weren't made like that. Kitchens weren't made like that back in the day. You had your, everything lined up against the walls, but you had this big, wide open island kitchen with a sky view. And I was never really overly impressed by these things, but I enjoyed them and I was happy for my friends and I enjoyed things with them. I would go back home after that and my mother would be waiting there with her scowl, saying, "Oh yeah, you just had such a good time with all your rich friends, huh? Oh yeah, you would just ditch your family for rich people any day," right? Stuff like that. Really toxic, mean things. And I really do feel that there was an element of that started coming alive once I hit a certain amount in my YouTube career. I actually began starting to feel like, going back to that girl saying, "Where is all this money coming from?" I definitely had that going on inside of me. I just remember thinking, like, is this legal? Am I doing something wrong? This doesn't feel right, But then there'd be days when I would shut that voice down, and I would put on a cute outfit, I'd get dressed up, I'd get in my SUV, and I'd put the windows down and listen to some music and drive into town and, go on a date. And it was so beautiful and so fun, but when I was in my more quiet times, I could start feeling that negative vibe ratcheting up in the background. Part of that was because I also was not handling my finances appropriately at first. I had talked to some accountants and I got a little bit of things done here and there, but I wasn't really committed. I wasn't truly paying attention to my paperwork. I wasn't paying enough taxes. And things definitely started getting away from me. And instead of dealing with it, I kind of just put my head in the sand. And I know this sounds weird, but eventually all the money coming in started stressing me out. I felt like, do you remember, I'm not sure what cartoon this is. If you guys remember what it is. Oh, Fantasia. Was it Fantasia? Where Mickey's the broom to do his chores for him and go pour water. And so the broom just gets duplicated and duplicated and duplicated. And soon there's all these brooms pouring water and it's all everywhere and it's out of control. It's like he got what he wanted, but now it's completely out of control. That was how I felt. I also remember when I started seeing that this was a lucrative thing, looking at all the other entrepreneurs and seeing the catchphrases that they used and thinking, oh, I want a 6-figure business. So basically it was kind of like in my mind, once I kind of hit that milestone, something in my mind just kind of shut off and I wasn't really all that, you can definitely see I started having less and less interest in putting effort into it. And one thing I learned from that is not to limit the things that you can do in your life. Don't put small limits on yourself. I do think it's really good to set goals, but once you start achieving them, you need to kick them up. You need to set them higher. That was another mistake that I made. So I was overwhelmed by the money. I was also really overwhelmed by the time. I had so much free time, right? This you're talking about, I had spent my entire life working full-time jobs at the mall. I often had multiple jobs on the go. I often had multiple jobs along with multiple side hustles on the go. I did things like mystery shopping. I used to be one of those weird people that catalogs and methodically enters contests. I won a lot of contests. I've won all kinds of things. I've won TVs. I won a paid trip for a week. That was like another little side hustle I had. I'd win things and sell them for money. But I was so used to constantly having to work and work and work like a dog for money that when I finally hit the passive income that I had wanted, and I was recovering my health and I was in the beautiful wilderness, I really enjoyed it, but it definitely got to a point where I would just kind of wake up and be like, all right, I'm going to do the same thing I did yesterday. And there were even times when I would just be, off driving to go do some random errand in some beautiful small mountain town that I'd concocted for myself that day as being important, like feeling like I'm really wasting some time here. And something about it just felt wrong. I was also overwhelmed by the amount of people that I began meeting. I would have full DMs. Some of these people in the DMs were people with blue check marks, professional athletes or, former TV stars, emails from all kinds of people, messages on Facebook. I would do events in Calgary shortly after I got to Calgary, and there would be people fighting in a lineup to come and talk to me after. I was honestly kind of desperate for attention and friendship and connection with people. And the attention that I got from YouTube and from being an entrepreneur was intense. People warn about this with celebrities or lottery winners, and I remember thinking, I have a YouTube channel. It's not the same. I can handle this. I'm a smart woman. I know what I'm doing. But I had so many toxic interactions with people that started off with them coming after me to be my friend, and me just being foolish and believing that other people had the same intentions that I did. I had many people who would approach me online or in person, and they seemed like they were genuine. They wanted to get to know about me. They wanted to be my friend. They thought I was unique. And, I thought, oh, wow, for this person to appreciate me, they must be really cool too. Like, let me get to know them. And then eventually, after they'd known me for a very short period of time, that's when it would start, right? Asking me questions about the numbers I was doing, or, asking me to look at their business plans, or asking me for business advice, or, people who wanted a free therapist, right? They say, hey, you want to talk? And then I show up and they're going to throw all their garbage all over me while I'm sitting there like, what just happened? I really learned that I do not want to be connecting with people over business. That's not the level that I play on in this life. I really can't see myself doing consulting on this anymore. I find that a lot of people who go looking for a business consult or who desperately want to ask me a question are in a very low state. Remember in the previous section, I talked about how before I did any of this and during it as well, I got myself into this realm of reality where I wasn't struggling. I was just naturally going around and creating money out of thin air, out of knowledge and from fun and from joy in my heart. I wasn't like desperately begging and looking to cling on to someone to help me, right? That energy just brings me down, and I let that happen to me numerous times, and I really regret that. Not only that, but when you try to help someone who's in that space, you don't actually help them. You contribute to their sense of needing help, right? And I found that one thing I found that was really interesting, and it happened without fail, is that someone sent me an email with a question that could just easily be Googled. And I actually went out of my way and replied. They would instantly reply back with more easily Googleable questions. So it was like this endless well of, please help me, victim mentality. And that just completely turns me off. I'm not going to do business consults, but I am going to take the best of my knowledge, information, and magic and put them into digital products that anyone can buy at any time and benefit from. And I finally have a few good friends in my life who are not interested in what I do for a living, although they do think it's pretty cool. So that's where I'm at with this journey right now. I thank you so much for being here on this journey with me. Take courage and Godspeed, my friends. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.